Hello, and welcome to our 7th Star Wars retrospective. This one's on The Force Awakens, which came out in 2016?
2015.
I was so
right
close.
at the end.
December 14th in Los Angeles. December 18th, countrywide, nationwide.
On your
What,
side.
what, what do we think about this? This was the first Star Wars movie in a long time, and J.J. Abrams, the first Star Wars movie under Disney's helm, and it's really good. I think it injected a certain amount of energy into the franchise that
I agree.
was really needed.
I adore Force Awakens. I think it's
Saw
excellent.
you lead it. I was like,
I think Force Awakens is so good. It's my pick for most fun Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
It's such a great like whiz bang space adventure. I think that Force Awakens is exactly what Star Wars needed to sort of launch into this new era under Disney. I know that one of the big critiques, and we'll get into plot, is well, it's just a New Hope again because there's the big Death Star and Star Killer base. But I think that parallels are a different thing than story retreads.
yes.
And I think that having similar beats to A New Hope to introduce us to our new characters and still having the legacy characters in there to ground the universe as something that you know and are familiar with I don't think there was a better way to start this franchise, this new trilogy, and introduce us to the new characters in it.
We should probably also say, I'm Gianni,
Oh, sure. I'm Flynn.
and Sam is here.
I'm Sam. Hi.
Sam, what did you think of The Force Awakens when it first came out?
Oh man.
Like when you were in the theater, what was your
Cried
first
a lot.
impressions?
Cried a lot. I loved it. I had mostly just kind of recently become a Star Wars fan at that point. But I don't know. It was very overwhelming, I think, is a good way of thinking about it. God. I remember thinking there are a lot of points that it was very similar to A New Hope, but I really like that kind of arbitrary conversation about like, is Rey Luke, and well, if Han is, if Poe is Han, then who's Leia? And I really like that kind of stopped after people actually saw the movie and understood that like the new characters were the new characters.
Right.
And I think that what I really like about The Force Awakens is that they did a really good job of including the old characters, but really making the new characters stand out. So you really focused on them rather than like, well, where's Luke?
Yeah.
Even though that's the plot of the movie is where's
Right.
Luke, where's Luke Skywalker? It's like you're thinking about it, but it's not what you're really focused on.
Yeah, I adore that so much in The Force Awakens because I think that some people in discourse about these new Star Wars movies tend to forget, like, this is not Luke Skywalker's story, and it's not Han Solo's story, and it's not General Leia's story. It's Rey's story. It's Kylo/Ben's story. It's Finn's story. It's Poe's story. So those legacy characters aren't there to be the main driving forces of the plot. They're there to service the new characters' stories. And I think that, Harrison Ford is doing it in this movie.
Yes,
He's
it's
awesome.
great.
And I know that this is probably something that maybe he didn't expect to do, like to have to revisit Han Solo. But I appreciate him so much for really committing to it and really getting right back into it and being the Han we all know and love. But yeah, again, like, they're there for the new characters. This is not about the old characters. Because if it were, we wouldn't introduce Rey or Kylo or any of that. They wouldn't be the big faces on the poster. So I feel like I don't know what people expected when I feel like they thought that Luke Skywalker would be a swashbuckling one-man wrecking crew, and we can get into that. But
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I said a few minutes ago that I think The Force Awakens kind of injected a crazy amount of energy into an otherwise kind of dead franchise after Revenge of the Sith. I mean, no one really thought we were getting another Star Wars movie, I don't think, or at least as soon as we did.
yeah,
And then when this one came out, I think J.J. Abrams was exactly the person to bring on board. I think all of his films bleed with this frenetic energy throughout, and they're also about love, too.
Oh,
which
yes.
is something we'll definitely get into with this film because there's a lot of heartbreak, I think, and there are a lot of missteps that we learn about from our old characters that they've made in their lives. And getting back to those newer characters, I mean, in the opening scene, we're introduced to Poe Dameron, and we're immediately behind him and BB-8, and Kylo freaking Ren drops down.
Ugh.
Adam Driver.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Driver, speaking to the performances in this movie, I mean, every new character, I can't imagine somebody else playing those roles.
Yeah.
Daisy Ridley as Rey is, you buy into her story so quickly, and you're so immediately behind her. And John Boyega as Finn, who kind of has to communicate this conflict of being raised up to be a stormtrooper, and then as soon as he's thrown into the fire, he realizes that that's not for him and that's not the life he wants to lead. But he's still like walking this balance of in The Force Awakens, because he doesn't necessarily want to be a stormtrooper, but he also doesn't know that he wants to fight alongside the Resistance. He doesn't know that he wants to be part of this larger rebellion. He just wants to go off on his own. And yeah, Poe doesn't have a ton to do in this movie. They were planning on killing him off until Oscar Isaac came along, and that's who you want to talk about with Poe, because Oscar Isaac just immediately oozing with charm, I think, is a good way to describe Oscar Isaac in most things he does.
Yes.
And Poe's this, like flyboy, like lovable rogue type character, one of the best pilots in the Resistance. Just everybody is so good.
Yeah, everyone's firing on all cylinders, I think, in the film. And that's something that I think could have been a risk, bringing back Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
He got paid handsomely for those 2 seconds.
yeah.
Of course,
That's all good.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit about our original characters, because they all have so much going on in the film.
Yeah.
And I mentioned also in the beginning of my little spiel that like there is such an urgency from the get-go in this movie, that the First Order is clearly on top here. The Resistance is losing the fight. We don't know where Luke Skywalker is. Han Solo is out in the galaxy doing his own thing.
Hunting Wrath Tars.
And Leia is leading the Resistance. But something big here is that we find out that Kylo Ren is the son of Leia and Han, and they have an interesting history there.
Yeah, I think it's I like the risks that this movie took with the older characters. Like, they broke up Han and Leia.
Yeah.
They sent our hero off to the middle of nowhere and made him not so much a hero anymore. And they made Kylo Ren, instead of being Luke's son, they made him Han and Leia's. And I think that's a huge risk. Like, it's the Skywalker Saga, and they chose Leia as the Skywalker to continue instead of Luke. And I don't know. I never could commend JJ enough for being like, no, we're gonna do this instead. Yeah.
Yeah, and this movie's so confident with all those decisions. Like, it never second guesses. It just throws you right in there and is like, this is what's happening, buy in or don't. And I think that a lot of people did. I feel like the reaction to Force Awakens was pretty overwhelmingly positive, and it feels like it was a smaller subsection of people that sort of disliked it, and then the criticism kind of kept growing. People
Like retroactive.
right, yeah, exactly. Like, people not liking Rey's character as much.
I know.
People saying that
People.
again, like I touched on, like that it's just a remake of A New Hope. I couldn't feel like that criticism could be more wrong.
I agree.
Because number one, if it was just a remake of A New Hope, why don't you like Rey more?
I know.
Why
If
don't
she's
you-
just Luke.
Yeah, why don't you like Rey as much as Luke? But I mean, George Lucas said in 5 zillion interviews that Star Wars is like poetry, it rhymes. So of course there's going to be story parallels, and of course you kind of see the way the Force works in this sort of cyclical nature. So I think that Force Awakens was kind of the perfect way to kickstart this.
Yeah, and certainly the Force is used in new and interesting ways, in starting with this film and then going further in the sequel trilogy with The Last Jedi. But I think we see some interesting things. Like in that first scene, Kylo Ren stopping the laser blast.
So
and
good.
keeping it there for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So good.
So strong. It's so
just
cool.
just a secondary
Yeah.
use of his power. He's interrogating Poe, and the laser is just still out
Buzzing,
there being
So good.
held in the Force. Yeah, the introduction of Kylo Ren as a villain
Yeah.
is so effective in this. Like, just immediately you get a sense of how powerful he is. Like you said, he does something new with the Force that we've never seen that kind of demonstrates how strong he is with it. So intimidating. He immediately murders a character we were just introduced to that
Yeah.
we don't really. I think a lot of us didn't know how Force Awakens was going to go. This movie had such a great marketing campaign. So they get Max von Sydow to play Lor Santeca, and people were kind of questioning. I remember theories running around that he was Boba Fett.
Jesus.
But people questioning, like, oh, well, what role will he play in this new trilogy? Is he like an Obi-Wan style hermit? And then he just dies.
Yeah.
5
Chopped
minutes
off.
into the movie, Kylo Ren just chops him down.
Which is something interesting is that no one feels safe in this film
No.
either.
Yeah,
you know?
agreed.
It's like anyone could go at any minute, and Kylo Ren is such a loose cannon, and we get that sense from him, like from the first scene.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think this speaks to Adam Driver's performance, and it certainly speaks to the writing of Kylo Ren. He is probably the most compelling character in this new trilogy, hands down.
Easily.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Like the Rise of Skywalker is coming, but we don't know where he's gonna go. Is he all bad? No. Is he all good? No. We don't know where he'll fall in the end, but it's definitely interesting. He's definitely just a broken boy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
He's just a kid. Yeah.
And certainly, as Sam sort of touched on with him being the character to carry the Skywalker mantra, I think that when you announce that you're making Star Wars 7, if you think that there's going to be a child with the Skywalker bloodline, you probably think that they're the new hero and they're the new sort of like golden character of the franchise. And, you know, credit for getting their hands dirty and not making that the case, because I think it makes for all the more interesting and complex a story about this character who you can root for and you can hope that the light prevails. But, yeah, also dips into the dark side of the Force, has trauma, has been, you know, sort of like really like darkly seduced by the Force. When we watched the prequel trilogy, Anakin kind of like has this snap moment with Palpatine as far as as far as trying to save Padme. That's what compels him. But the way we get Ben Solo's seduction by the dark side is very gradual and very dark, and Supreme Leader Snoke is in his head with the Force, like bringing him over. It's very dark and very interesting to have this be the case.
Yeah, I just speaking on Kylo Ren, I really like the choice that he's completely like in his Vader-esque uniform, and until he legitimately wants to talk to Rey, and he takes his helmet off and he's just like, I'm not just like a monster in the mask.
Yeah.
I want to get in your head and I want to understand some stuff, but that he's entirely sympathetic, I think. Like that first scene with Lor Santeca, you don't know that he's Han and Leia's son, but Lor Santeca talks to him like he's Han and Leia's son. And you're like, immediately once you find out that he's Han and Leia's kid, you're just like, okay, well, what happened to him then? Like,
Right.
why did he go bad? And I think that he's like easily, the most compelling character of the new series, but it's like, you do want to know why people go bad and like if they can be redeemed and saved. And so like, to bring that elephant in the room, when he kills Han,
Yeah.
people are like, that's it, he's bad. I'm like, yeah, he looked totally like okay with that decision after he did it. Like, ay.
Yeah, and I know there's still debate as far as that moment, whether Han played any role in it, because they're both holding on to Kylo's lightsaber, whether Han ignited it in an attempt to save Ben, if he thought that if Han thinks in that moment that if Kylo Ren doesn't kill Han Solo, that Supreme Leader Snoke will kill Kylo Ren, it does make sense for him to sort of ignite that lightsaber and help him in that moment in order to save his son, when you can tell that he knows there's still light in him.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a rough scene.
Well, I think I agree. I also think there is an interesting aspect of, like, he did think that killing his dad would end the light in him, and then when he realizes it doesn't, he spends the entire next movie trying to build a connection with Rey, and you're like, Han absolutely served a purpose, because if Kylo just went bad and stayed bad, then Han's sacrifice would literally mean nothing. So
Yeah, that moment, I think that the lead up to it, I remember being in the theater and like just gripping the cup holder, because I think we all kind of knew, right? From the second that Han stepped onto that bridge, Han was done, you know? And I don't know. Still, like, you can still picture it, just the saber going through and Han falling, and it's like, and Leia feeling it from, you know, planets away. That's a death I think that is felt throughout the galaxy, you know?
Yeah, and visually in that scene, I mean, I understand that people have pointed out that it's not the most complex thing in the world to have Kylo Ren's face be half in darkness and half in light, but it still works so effectively, and it's so good at communicating what's going on internally with Ben Solo / Kylo Ren in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Han Solo, I mean, just the way they took his character, too, I think was so smart. And like you said, Sam, earlier, it was such a risk. So many risks were taken in the film, with taking the characters in new directions and then introducing the new characters as well. But we see Han as this failed father, and who's clearly isolating himself far away because he's feeling regretful, and he's not proud of what happened with Ben. And Leia too. Clearly, that was like the crumbling of a really great relationship from Empire, from Return of the Jedi. That love, and it's still there,
Oh yeah, and I think that's like, we talked about this a little bit. We talked about A New Hope, where people's perception of Han is this like gunslinger, cool guy, but he is so much heart. And just the scene where Rey is like, you knew like Luke Skywalker, and you could see on his face just like the years of like regret of like not being able to help Luke or Ben or Leia, and it's just like, yeah, I knew Luke Skywalker. It's like, I'm tearing up.
Harrison Ford. What a performance.
Yeah, it speaks to Harrison as an actor, because it's no secret that he kind of became burnt out on Star Wars, and he wanted Han to kind of be gone in Return of the Jedi. So I think that's why a lot of people going into Force Awakens kind of knew that it was probably going to be Han's swan song, because Harrison Ford already didn't want to do the last movie 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So, but, you know, so much credit to him for really committing and getting back into that headspace of Han, and giving it his all in maybe the best Han Solo performance in the entire franchise.
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely. I think it's funny. I think we learned kind of after the movie came out that was JJ's pitch to get Harrison Ford to come back on. Like, we'll kill you in this one.
He was like, done.
And Carrie Fisher in this film too really brings something to the General Leia, right? Kind of overseeing the Resistance, and I think like from seeing her again too, just, you know, we feel not necessarily nostalgic seeing our original characters back, but like there is a purpose to bringing them back, you know, which I think was so important that they get right with this film and with this new trilogy. And I think they just nailed that too from the get-go with her.
Yeah, and I think that where we find all of our, you know, legacy original trilogy characters might not have been what everybody expected, but really makes sense to me from a storytelling standpoint. And especially for Leia, this doesn't really get touched on in Force Awakens, but there have been, you know, sort of novels that have come out that indicate that Leia kind of tried to help build up the Republic after the fall of the Empire in Return of the Jedi, and it didn't work out. So of course she's leading the Resistance. Of course she's the cool one that is sort of putting this together. She's been there before. She adds legitimacy to this Resistance. And Leia is so cool.
I know. Yeah, it like you were saying, it makes sense for their characters. Like, I like that when Han and Leia are broken apart because of what happens with Ben, they go back to their old roles, which is Han runs,
Right.
and Leia just is like, all right, we're gonna keep going,
Yep.
and I'm gonna keep leading, and it's gonna be fine. Just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I think it's also what was really interesting and probably one of my favorite parts of the movie when it came out is that we learned so much about the behind the masks of these stormtroopers.
Oh yeah.
You know, and John Boyega obviously is, as Finn, is kind of the face of that, and like they can face real trauma, and these are soldiers, you know, not necessarily just bumbling clones. Like these
Yeah,
are people, you know, under these helmets.
And when Finn escapes with Poe, you see Captain Phasma and General Hux looking at a sort of holo scan,
It's a
and it has a
baby.
picture of a baby of baby Finn, and you're sort of like hinted in on the fact that like these are children just taken,
Brainwashed.
yeah, by the First Order, brainwashed, and then just thrown into, you know, to be the enforcers of this fascist overreaching government. And I think that's so horrifying. And like you were saying, it sort of humanizes stormtroopers in an interesting way. Similar, I think, to the way that the clone troopers were humanized in the Clone Wars animated series. And I think that adds so much value to stormtroopers. Just they're not faceless anymore, but they're still sort of upholding this fascist empire. So it adds a bit of complexity and depth where there wasn't any before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the film is just really good. I mean, I think that, like you said, I think that was the general consensus when it first came out, that like this is good. Star Wars is back, you know.
Yeah.
John Williams came back to do the score, which was obviously amazing.
Undefeated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was Peter Mayhew's last performance too, as
Yes.
as Chewie, which I guess that's fitting to go off with
Han.
Han. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, so much heartbreak in this film, as there
Yeah.
is so many uplifting moments too. I mean, the first time we see Rey activate the lightsaber in the forest,
Yep.
that was like my theater cheered. I think you know, yeah, so many great moments.
Yeah, I did want to talk about, because you first brought up heartbreak. I really like, well, I don't like when people say that Rey is just like the good new main character. When the first time we meet Rey, she's clearly so isolated and sad and hungry and like alone, and it's like, why wouldn't that person be drawn to strong emotions?
Right.
And like that first, like it is a credit to like the editing. I don't actually know who edited this movie, if it was JJ's editor, but this movie is like, I mean, edited to the teeth, but also just has these long moments of just letting things breathe.
Yeah.
Like Finn in the desert, Rey meeting baby BB-8, like. You just get to breathe with the new characters, and it's something that the original trilogy did really well, and the prequel trilogy didn't do. But yeah, like Rey is the most heartbreaking character to me. Like even against someone like Kylo Ren, it's just like Kylo is kind of like, he's not sure in his choices, but he's making choices. Where Rey is just stuck, and you can feel how stuck she is the entire time she's on screen.
Marianne Brandon and Mary Jo Markey, frequent collaborators
Yes.
with J.J.
With
Abrams.
JJ,
Yeah, and Rey is so great that we see that she was dropped on this planet as a child. We don't necessarily know by who in this movie, but you kind of infer like she's been there for years and years, most of her life. She's always been at the bottom of the totem pole. She always had to fend for herself, but she still has that wide-eyed optimism. And I think that's sort of best reflected when she's with Han, Chewie, and Finn and the Falcon, and they go to Takodana. And she says she didn't know there was this much green in the entire galaxy. And that
The way Han looks at her.
yeah, and talk about like
It's like Luke.
yeah, like
Yeah.
a sort of heartbreaking moment, but also like just such a clear explanation of why Han feels this connection with her right away, because Luke is that naive kid
Yep.
in in A New Hope, and Luke had a more favorable upbringing
Yes.
than Rey, but still like felt like he was stuck in a place, and then kind of is just introduced to this world way beyond what he ever imagined.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much value to Rey as a character.
Yeah, you mentioned that scene where they drop down on Takodana, and just even from the get-go with Han and Rey, like you were saying, we feel that connection there, and you can't help but wonder how that would have gone, how that relationship would have furthered if Han had survived.
Yeah. Or if
the-
she ran off with him like he offered.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he did to Luke.
I remember thinking when I was sitting down in the theater, like, oh, this could be his daughter, and maybe Han and
That was
and
certainly
Leia
a theory for a
want
long
to keep
time,
that
yeah.
a secret.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I remember that being the big topic of discussion at the time, and you have to wonder, But
Oh yeah.
yeah, even their relationship as it stands, though, and as it stood, was, I think, good for her character too.
Oh yeah.
To have someone like Han there, and I just think it was adding to the heartbreak that she saw him die too.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think it's a little interesting, like that scene with Kylo Ren and Rey, where he's like, "Oh, you see him as a father figure, like he would disappoint you," and it's just like it's that like she's obviously experienced in what she's been through, but she doesn't understand familial relationships at all. So he's just like, "No, he's great to you, but like
Yeah.
spend more than a year with him, and he was awful." Like, and I just like that experience of like Kylo knows the original trilogy characters,
Right.
whereas Rey and Finn just see them as like these myths.
Yeah.
And Kylo's like, no,
Yeah,
they
they're-
suck.
and anybody that Rey has ever had any type of relationship with has been abusive, and so, Han Solo not yelling at her
I know.
every minute to pick up scrap metal is probably like,
Yeah.
wow, father of the year.
Yeah.
So of course she would buy into that, and I don't think it would add anything to Han and Rey's relationship at all if they had ended up
Related.
if he had ended up being her father. I think that as it stands, it's still really great character work, and it really makes sense given what we learn about Rey, what we know about Han.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. So, some closing thoughts on The Force Awakens.
Man.
As I said in the beginning, I think it really jump-started this trilogy. It really hit the ground running. J.J. Abrams was the perfect guy to bring in, fresh
Agreed.
off of Star Trek.
Yes.
He did it multiple times.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I know.
Yeah,
Well,
so
when he was making Star Trek, he clearly wanted to be making Star
Yeah.
Wars.
I adore The Force Awakens.
Yeah. Everything you said, Force Awakens, I think, as much as I value the movie, like, I just think that as it stands is the perfect way to launch into this trilogy. And I think that JJ did a really good job of setting up what he needed to set up, but sort of leaving it open to so many possibilities, because not only did that allow for speculation and discussion long after the movie was done, but sort of allowed the next person that came in, which was Rian Johnson, to really go in any direction he felt like and still have it feel consistent with what JJ set up. And I think that's a hard balance to not to open up this trilogy and not sort of like lead the person that's following you up into a certain direction. And so I think Force Awakens has a lot of value in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh boy. Well, I love Force Awakens. I agree with everything that's been said already. I hate going last. But I genuinely think that expanding your world, expanding original characters, and introducing fantastic, like the 4 new main characters before, Last Jedi, are just fantastic additions to Star Wars. And I don't know, I really love Force Awakens. I love what it did for Star Wars, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to sum it up, too. Just what it did for Star Wars. So that wraps up our 7th retrospective on The Force Awakens. Looking forward to The Last Jedi and then The Rise of Skywalker. We're almost there. Yeah, it's going to be wild.
Soon.
Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. I'm Gianni.
I'm Flynn.
I'm Sam.
And thanks as always to Stockton and SSTV for allowing us to use the equipment. And we'll see you on the next one.